All right, here we go. We are in the wrap-up session, day 2, and has it not been a phenomenal 24 hours? I can't even, I said what I really enjoyed this year is I actually took the time to not just be part of the program, but to be a participant in the program. And I tried to walk around and listen, and I absolutely love the opportunity to engage with so many of you. And I know that, I feel really fulfilled. I know Blenda is here from United. Monica was here yesterday up on the stage, right? But this term kept coming up, and I said, I feel like we all got a little bit of like rocket fuel, right? We got our jet fuel, and we're like ready to take off. And that's what we need to do when we leave here today, is feel like take that jet fuel that we have, right? Go launch, and then when we launch, find a couple people to share it with and get them as inspired as we feel when we walk out of here today, right? So to continue the inspiration this morning, we have a great colleague and dear friend, Cal Thomas, who's going to come out and spend some time with us, a little bit of interactivity, and share some of his great ideas on leadership. So Cal, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Michelle. It's always hard to come out on a stage after some otherwise well-meaning person gives you an introduction that you have to live up to. Anybody learn anything today and yesterday? Yeah, all right. I share a quick anecdote. There was a young woman, I think she's in here, I won't out her, but she said, I overheard her say in an early session, I'm new in my career, I'm only 22, so, and you can imagine what came next. About 4 hours later, just before happy hour, not after, just before happy hour, I heard her say, I may only be 22 and starting my career, but. So congratulations to everybody here that, hey, that's a victory. Our mission accomplished. So I've had the great luck and privilege to meet a lot of interesting people and also run into a lot of people that I've known for a number of years. And it was interesting, I got 2 questions very consistently, or 2 comments, I should say. Number 1 was, hey, Cal, your wife is really awesome. She's great. Why don't we see more of her? Of course, I said, well, of course she is. And she is, in fact, a woman business leader. She's been a finance executive for many years in the very male-dominated technology business. So I snuck that in here. I'm sure I'll pay for it later, but I had to acknowledge that. The other comment I got was, Cal, is on your tag that says speaker, but you're not a woman business leader, right? I said, I am, in fact, aware of that. But kind of thinking ahead, being a little self-aware, only a little, I decided to bring some friends with me or some family members with me. And they're not actually here. Actually, they're long since deceased. But they never would have had the ability ever, given their time, to come to a conference or something like this and exchange ideas. Because there really, in their time, were not a lot of strong, smart women business leaders who were able to be outspoken. So let me talk through a couple of those. First, I'll introduce you to my great-grandmother, Florence. We called her Marnie. She was a character. She was born into a shipping or wooden boat building business of her father's. There were 9 children. Not all of them survived childhood. I think 6 of them did. She certainly did, and she was a character. She had the opportunity, but she chose not to enter the building or the shipbuilding business, the boat building business, much to her father's chagrin. Apparently they didn't get along very well. Turns out a lot of people she didn't get along with very well. And she said, I'm going to be a nurse. That's what I want to do. And this is what, in the 1800s, mid to late 1800s. I'm going to be a nurse. So she struck off, went to school, and became a nurse. Married a doctor, a dashing, handsome doctor named Calvin Merrill Thomas the first. Just want to check the lineage there. They had 2 kids, and she and Dr. Cal didn't apparently get along too well either, and she decided she would move to Florida and start her own practice, which we now would be kind of a healthcare clinic, which didn't exist then. And a woman starting that couldn't possibly do that. In her later years, in her late 90s, she handed me a little piece of paper that, if you believe all her stories, and I choose to, that was the first first driver's license in the state of Florida issued to a woman. And I choose to believe that. She was 99 and a half, and I remember she was on her way out, as she said, but she taught me how to play dominoes. Now, I don't know if that was a life-changing event, but we did it at night, under a big blanket with a flashlight, because it was past both our bedtimes. And we got in a ton of trouble from my grandmother, who I'll talk about in a few more minutes, So she wasn't afraid to get in trouble. She wasn't really concerned with what people thought about her. And she did a lot of pretty interesting things that people didn't normally do. And I thought she was wonderful. Let's go to my grandmother, Mamie. Where did we come up with these names for our grandparents? I don't know. But we called her Mamie. And she was a hairdresser, and she had a shop in her house. It was the biggest room in the house. It was converted to a shop. I think zoning might have been a little different back then. But I remember as a kid going in, and there were all different types of women there. And some of them, they called them the women from the mansion families. There were the trailer families. And there were the other little salt box house families, or whatever they called them. And they were kind of distinct, different classes. But they all went to my grandmother, and that was a center of communication and information. And for a little kid at 5 or 6 years old, it was pretty interesting. I didn't know the difference from one to the other. In fact, one of my aunts, one of her sisters, said, you know, your grandmother, you should have seen her in action. They were at church. I was like, oh boy, here we go. And she went over to the mansion ladies and said, you know, I just saw you snub so-and-so who was one of the trailer ladies. And if you ever do that again, you'll never have your hair done in my shop. So she was a bit of an interesting bridge builder even then. And nobody ever gave her any crap. That's for sure. I'll talk about my other grandmother, my grandmother Thomas, Polly. She wanted grandmother Polly. I never got the grandmother part out. We sorted that out and we lived with it. My grandmother Thomas was the founder and owner of the Maine State Ballet, or the Thomas School of Dance in Maine. And anybody between the age of about 4 and the age of 24 in the late 50s to the early 80s were taught ballet, tap, jazz, etiquette, ballroom dancing, and manners from my grandmother. She was pretty strict about that stuff. I was the only kid in home ec class who knew how to set a table, by the way. And she was a tough one. And I remember being in Portland, Maine, and she was having a discussion with the leader of the Portland Symphony Orchestra, who's kind of a big deal. And I'm like, it's my grandmother, and it's just some guy she's talking to. What do I know? But I remember the discussion fairly distinctly, and it sounded more like, yes, Mrs. Thomas. Of course, Mrs. Thomas. Well, certainly, Mrs. Thomas. Now, it wasn't all unicorns and rainbows there. I know they sometimes struggled to pay the mortgage. They looked wealthy because they had a big house. Well, it was a dance studio. They lived on top of a dance studio, so it looked like a big house. I also know my grandfather, who was a pretty quiet guy, they had to be wealthy people because he traded in his Chrysler every 2 years. Well, he traded it in because he couldn't afford to pay for it anymore, so he had to swap it and get a different payment. I didn't know that. So they were pretty interesting people. They were pretty tough. And my grandmother really had to do a lot of different things and make some very tough decisions. So we'll go now to my mother. My mother was by no means a single mom, but we moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, something 800 miles away from all her family, because it was a great career opportunity for my father. Great dad, we've always been close, but he traveled. So my mother had a business. She also had her own dance studio. She had 2 young kids and managed a household with no family support. She had to do a lot of managing. So I got a lot of lessons from her. And then here's the fun one, is my sister Kate. My sister Kate was a loud and proud sponsor of LGBT seniors, or elders, LGBT seniors. That's what it was called back then. How many people have heard of LGBT elders? No, you wouldn't, because they're not really a group. They had no voice, they had no representation. And my sister found that through her work at nonprofits, and she decided that she was going to form events, a specific event to this day, or just before COVID. It was called Kate's Cafe. And it's where the LGBT elders could come together and have a community, because they didn't have a community. They had to be very quiet. They had a lot of fear. They couldn't get out and socialize. It was very taboo. So she created Kate's Cafe, and I think to this day it still exists, or it's coming back now. Why is that significant? That was so far outside her comfort zone. She was very much an introvert. She loved people, but she didn't like to speak to people. She had to have a number of appointments with the mayor of Cambridge, Massachusetts. She had to talk to boards of not-for-profits to get this. She had to negotiate meeting space, things, and I was there for that, a lot of it. I got to witness it. Those were things that were so far outside her comfort zone, it's a miracle that she could do it. But she did. So why am I telling those stories? So as a younger kid with great-grandparents and grandparents, I didn't know that I was in the presence and the midst of mentors. I didn't know that these were role models. I mean, what 6, 8, 4, 10-year-old kid knows that? I didn't know that. I didn't know I was learning all these amazing lessons from these mostly women. Now, I did have some good male role models in my life, but what I have witnessed certainly is they didn't have the number of obstacles to overcome than the women I know in my life. So what I learned, and I didn't know I was learning, is you have to fail to win. Didn't know that back then. Know it now. I didn't know that we're going to have to make some decisions that are going to disappoint people that we care for, that we believe, or they say that they have our best interest in mind, but it's really not our interest. I didn't know that I had to have a plan, we have to have a plan, or we're going to be part of somebody else's plan. And that's usually not a good thing. Well, there are some notable exceptions to that, for sure. I didn't know that sometimes we have to scare the bejesus out of ourselves to go do something that is very far out of our comfort zone so we can stand up for ourselves, do something for us, or do something for other people. And I'd also never seen the little drawing, and I'm sure most of you have, that says, magic only happens when you get outside your comfort zone. So I didn't know any of those things. I do now. It's been, I won't tell you how many years, but could have a 5 in it. And I've been very lucky. More than a decade ago, I made a decision to become a life-changing decision to become a Sandler trainer. It's a different story. So now I do know some of these tools. We do have tools. We have people. We have coaches. We have lessons. We heard a bunch of great lessons from the people in this room, the leaders and the participants, all of them. I want to give you a couple things that maybe you can take away, maybe you can use, because now we know what some of those are. By the way, my understanding is this was intended to be a TED-style talk. Is that what people knew? That's what we call it. That's what we call it. Okay, we can't write it. That's what we call it. But I don't see Ted in the room. So are you okay if we kind of bend the rules a tiny bit and make this participative? Yeah? I can't see a lot of nodding heads, so I could use voices. I can see a lot of bright lights. Ah, outstanding. Thank you. If my grandmother were in the front row, she'd be nodding, or my great-grandmother, she'd be nodding and giving me a thumbs up and a wink. So thanks for that. So I want to talk about things. I'm going to make the bigger title, we're going to call it Getting Rid of Head Trash. Getting rid of head trash. Head trash are non-supportive beliefs and sometimes actions that get in our way of doing what we need to do or want to do or what our goals are. Non-supportive beliefs or actions that get in our way, our own way. So I'm going to ask you to say this. Excuse me. Don't drink carbonated water before you get on a stage. So many things to learn today. We're going to count to 3, and I'm going to ask you to say, that's just head trash. Louder. 1, 2, 3.
That's just head trash.
Good. It does take practice, so let's do it one more time. That's just head trash. 1, 2, 3.
That's just head trash.
Outstanding. I hope you take that with you, not the head trash, but that saying with you for many months to come. So on your chairs, you may be sitting on it, but on your chairs are some cards. We're going to do a little exercise. This is the get the cards out part, and there's some classy pens from NJBIA. So let me ask this question. This is more participation. Show of hands, which I can't see, so that means voices, raised voices. How many people here, in addition to me, sometimes talk to themselves or have conversations in their heads? Yes, that sounds like a yes. Good. And if it's not you, maybe you can volunteer your friends who aren't in the room. I understand that maybe it's other people that have this. Another shout out here. So I think there are some people in here that know more about psychology than I do, so I'll keep it light, and you can correct me later, please, without the microphone. What would you guess of those conversations we have with ourselves, so those thoughts in our heads, what percentage would you imagine are positive, supportive discussions? 0, harsh group. 15? 15? 15. This group is going to be clearly above average. We know that going in. So depending which book you read, it's 15, maybe even up to 20%. Number that stands out to me is 74 to 78% of all self-talk is negative. Man, that is hard to wake up to in the morning. That's not a good place to be. So I learned this exercise from a guy, his name's Marcus Cauchy. He's a Brit, he's hilarious, and it was so impactful for me 10 years ago. I do it myself, and I probably do this 3 or 4 times a month as an exercise, which is good for me. So you can see what this is, right? Anybody know what these columns represent? Well, outstanding. Even late in a conference, nothing gets by you. There will be some people who might need a little help at the table because I'm going to ask you to make tick marks. And a tick mark is a little tiny line, and when you get 4 of them, when you get to the 5th one, you draw a line through it, and that's 5. Or however you want to count is up to you. So I'm going to give you 3 rules or 3 mantras, if you will. You might want to write them on the back of your card. That's why it's blank. You ready?
Yes.
Thank you. This is designed to help us with this negative self-talk. Number 1, no complaining. A few people just got tick marks, by the way, just saying. So no complaining, which means no complaining about myself. Boy, that was a dumb thing to say. I'll never be able to do what they're doing. I don't know why I'm doing this. I didn't do a good job with that. I'm kind of afraid with this. I better not do it. All those things. Or other people. So no complaining, that's number 1. You complain, tick mark. Number 2, about anything. Traffic, weather. Oh my gosh, it's going to rain today. It's going to ruin our weekend. Can we control the weather? No. What can we control, though? Our response, our action. We can only control our actions. Believe it or not, we can't even control our feelings initially. Right? We're going to have an emotional response to something. All we can control is the action we take in response to that feeling. We can debate it later, but it happens to be true. Number 3, even in thought. That's usually where the real groans come out. So I'll give you a little preview of what may happen. We're going to pretend for a moment today's Monday. Is that okay? Yes. What a great response table that is. Love it. You get the 5 stars for starters. So let's pretend today's Monday. Here's what I typically see happen, because 2 people do bring these back to sessions. It's amazing. On Monday, pretending today's Monday, there are going to be a lot of tick marks. You're going to have 15, 20, 30. There's going to be a dark column, which is good because that signifies what? Learning, awareness. It's great. Tuesday will be a little fewer, Wednesday fewer, Thursday fewer yet, and Friday, you're going to feel like a freaking rock star with all this negative stuff gone. And then what are Saturday and Sunday going to look like, would you guess? I'm leading the audience. One would hope they are going to be darker than Monday. What are we typically doing on a Saturday and a Sunday? Housework. Who are we with? Family, our friends, and we have habits, not all of us, have habits about complaining and bitching and moaning about all kinds of things with our families. So then you need another card to start all over again on Monday. How many people think they're willing to do that exercise? Yes, I can see a couple. Thanks for the lights. I can see a couple of hands. I will encourage you to do it. My data says the complaining goes down, the negative head trash, or the negative self-talk goes down even by hearing and doing the exercise one time. But do it for a week. It's amazing. I have one client, he does it once a month. It's still not getting better. Poor David. We'll call him David because that's his name. Yeah. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit. We're doing okay. Equal business stature. So my mother related a story about my grandfather, her father, and my father, a little background on my grandfather, he was, as he said, we didn't have a pot to pee in. We didn't have a gosh darn pot to pee in. That's nothing like what he said, by the way. We're being recorded. But they didn't. As a young kid, too young as I understand, he joined the Army. He was a cook in the Army. And in the Army, he met enlisted kids from all over the country. He met officers, and he met flag officers, the generals and the admirals and all those people, and he fed them, and he had interactions with all of them. It was kind of normal. After a few years in, he left the Army, went back to Maine. We're all from Maine, by the way. Came back to Maine. Things didn't go well for him. My grandmother, the hairdresser, was the primary breadwinner for a number of years. He figured it out. Ironically, his next job was a bartender. It's okay. Where he served derelicts, motorcycle gangs, normal people, millionaires, and literally billionaires. You'd be surprised how many billionaires there are in Maine. And again, he met that entire group of people, very comfortable. And I remember as a kid, we had lots of visitors to his house. It was a tiny house. It was a tiny ranch house. But there would be people to visit, to come in, hang out. I remember one guy had a brand new Rolls Royce. I'd never seen a Rolls Royce before. And there were a couple guys that came on their Harleys. And my mother asked him, "Hey, Dad, how do you know all these people? Why are you so comfortable talking to all these people?" And my grandfather, again, we're from Maine, he said, "Con," my mother's name was Connie, "Con, what I learned a long time ago is everybody puts their trousers on one leg at a time." I thought that was a pretty good lesson for a 6-year-old kid. And he did agree that he said that. So we all need to have equal stature, view that we have equal stature with people that we think are a little unreachable. In the sales world, we talk about having equal stature with your prospects, the CEO of a company or that director or whoever. Are we just going in, "Oh, thank you so much for your time, for seeing me, this poor little salesperson"? That's not okay. So we need to, in our heads, we need to have that equal stature. The other side is also true, and I love seeing it in this room. Women are much better at it than men, and I'm not pandering, it happens to be true. We have to allow people and view that other people have equal stature with us. Think about all the people that are making this thing possible. The servers, the staff out there, right? They put their trousers on the same way we do. We're all pretty equal with that. Whether other people believe it or not, that's a mindset that we absolutely need to have. All right, I'm going to go quickly into this. Is a full day class, by the way, and it's something I call IR theory. IR theory. The I stands for identity, how I feel about myself, my reputation with me, my self-concept, my self-worth, my self-esteem. Think those are important? Yes. Thank you for the yeses. I think they're important. The other side of this equation is the roles. What are roles? Quickly shout them out. What are roles we play in everyday life? Shout them out, quick. Wife, spouse, daughter, CEO, leader, speaker, caregiver. Lots of roles. And we assign ourselves values often. I did a terrible job at this. I did a great job at that. I did a mediocre job with that. It's a little bit of self-talk going on. Now, society will tell us that how well we do perform in our roles determines how we should feel about ourselves and how other people feel about us. Is that fair? Psychology tells us that how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, our self-concept, our self-worth, determines how we will perform in our roles. In fact, in Sandler, we have a rule, and it says you can only perform in your role at the level that you see yourself conceptually. So if you picture two scales of 1 to 10, and if I think my identity, how I feel about myself, is kind of suffering, it's down in that at least or mediocre range, I will never be able to perform in a role at the level that I really want to. Now, we can have some healthy debate about this, but think about how your mother felt about you when you were born, most of you. How does she feel? How was your identity score in her eyes on a scale of 1 to 10? 1,000. I love that. I like your mother. I'd love to meet her. What, has anybody been or known a teenage girl? There you go. I have to ask it both ways. What do you think their view of themselves on the identity scale is when they're about 13? It's not great. I want to put a caveat to this. What does their mother think? How does their mother feel about her baby? Fantastic. So we all, other than being annoyed and it's a teenager, right? It's all payback. We all have the capacity to be I-10s or to have an identity at that level. There are things we need to do, goal setting. There are a lot of different things that a lot of you know about, and those are some tools we have that a lot of us didn't know we had. So I'm going to leave you with just a couple things around this idea of getting rid of head trash. Number one, have equal stature with everybody. Those you aspire to and those that maybe you wonder about. We have to have equal stature. Number two, don't complain about yourself, about other people. And we'll leave this one, two more. Take care of your eyesight. Take good care of your identity, your self-esteem, your self-concept, how you feel about yourself. Don't care what other people say about you. You're just fine. It's what we say about ourselves and how we feel. And I think most importantly, every single day, we all need to make a commitment every day to take out at least a little bit of head trash. Thanks.